I'm Nadia, dietitian and certified intuitive eating counsellor, and welcome to Good Enough Nutrition, the podcast, a space where we chat all about nutrition and well-being, intuitive eating, body image, and a sprinkle of all things periods and hormones. I'm here to remind you that guilt has no place near our food or bodies, and that you are good enough as you are, always. So let's dig in. Hello, my cool cucumbers. Welcome back to Good Enough Nutrition, the podcast. Thank you for being here for episode 2. Now, I thought I would do an episode actually defining what I mean when I say good enough nutrition. What is it even? But before I do that, I actually wanted to intro the episodes by talking a little bit about what's been lighting me up recently, where I've been finding joy. If you follow me on Instagram or if you're one of my clients, one concept that I love is talking about the nervous system, but also talking about the concept of glimmers. Now, glimmers are like the opposite of triggers. So if triggers kind of make us activated or dysregulated, glimmers are the things that help us to calm and ground. They kind of give your nervous system like a little sigh and a bit of grounding. And so I'm constantly seeing where I'm finding new glimmers in my life, where I'm finding joy, what's lighting me up. And I thought it would be a nice way to intro the podcast, each episode, talking about what's lighting me up at the moment. And hopefully it will prompt you to think about what's lighting you up and look for more glimmers in your life. So at the moment, I've recently just got back from a trip to New Zealand where I went to visit family, and I had a lovely time aside from it being a bit grey and drizzly and cold, but it was still lovely to get away for a week. And what I found myself engaging a lot with is actually the things that I used to do in childhood. So when I went and visited my dad, I noticed that he had lots of shells all around the house. And then when I went and visited my grandparents in the North Island, they had exactly the same. And it really just took me back to being a kid and walking along the beach and finding all the beautiful shells and, putting them up to your ear and listening for the sea. And it was just such a beautiful thing that I love doing pretty much every weekend. So when I was back there, my dad and my grandparents gifted me a couple of shells to take home, which are now sitting in my bathroom and serve as a beautiful glimmer every time I go in there and look at them. But also when I got back, I actually took myself to the beach and spent, a good hour just wandering along the beach looking for beautiful shells. And I thought it was just such a nice way to continue that reconnection with my childhood that I started back when I was over in New Zealand. So I thought I just wanted to share that, and maybe I'll even share a little carousel of images on Instagram so you can check out what I'm talking about over there. Okay, so good enough nutrition. What is it even? Let's get on with the episode. So good enough nutrition, you probably heard about the concept of good enough parenting. And good enough parenting is, by my understanding, a movement to stop putting so much pressure on parents to be perfect. The immense weight of trying to do everything right when raising kids must be weigh so heavily on one's shoulders. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that would feel really heavy trying to do everything perfect. So I believe that the concept of good enough parenting came about, find countless books on it, and it talks about how we can release that pressure to be perfect when parenting so that we can parent in a much more authentic and human way. I think it talks about it in the way that, knowing that we can't believe that we will never stuff up as a parent. It's more acknowledging the fact that we will stuff up. And when we do, how can we build skills to work on repair, to work on improving the situation once we have stuffed up, because we're human and of course we will. Like I said, I'm not a parent, but that's at least the gist I get, and I just love this concept, and I wanted to poach it for when it comes to nutrition, because similar to parenting, society makes us believe that we're never good enough when it comes to nutrition either, unless we're quote unquote perfect, right? And even if we were to meet societal expectation of perfection, that bar is always shifting when it comes to nutrition. It's this is what you should do, and then it's this, and then it's this, and it's always moving. And it's such a shame, because we get this message of we're not a good person unless we're eating quote unquote good, or clean, or perfectly, or right. But here's the thing, when we try to level up to that societal expectation of perfection, it just leads us down the path of perfectionism and people-pleasing, experiencing a lot of food and body-related guilt and shame, all or nothing thinking, and worst of all, in my mind, is foregoing our own intuitive wisdom and our own connection with our body. And so in the clinic room, I see so many people that have been trapped in this, trying to eat perfectly washing machine, going round and round and round for the past 10, 20, 30 years. And so that's where the concept of good enough nutrition comes in. It's a concept that I came up with to help. I'm sure I probably wasn't the first one to come up with it, but it's a concept that I talk about in a way that it helps us to ditch perfectionism and reconnect with how you want to nourish yourself, not society, you. It's a concept that helps you to change the way you think about nutrition, tap back into your body cues, intuition and values, and release that food and body related shame and that all or nothing thinking. So I came up with 5 key principles that I tie to good enough nutrition to kind of make up that framework, to make it a little bit more understandable and compact. And those 5 key principles I'm going to walk you through, but they're around imperfection, or what I call good enoughness, authenticity, flexibility, practical, and holistic. So let me walk you through those 5. Okay, so firstly, good enough nutrition encourages imperfection, or like I said before, good enoughness. It promotes a shift away from perfectionism, shame, and guilt, and towards imperfection, empowerment, and choice. Good enough nutrition encourages authenticity. It gives permission and space to redefine what eating looks like for you based on what's authentic and important to you, not someone else, to you. Good enough nutrition promotes flexibility. It acknowledges that we're all unique and layered human beings. And what promotes well-being for you today may look very different compared to someone else today, and both of which may look different tomorrow, right? So it really encourages being kind of flexible and dynamic when it comes to thinking about how we eat. Good enough nutrition is practical. It considers your environment, your preferences, what's available and affordable to you, and the time that we live in. So it considers all the practicalities kind of, and under the social determinants of health as well. And then lastly, good enough nutrition is holistic. It recognizes that nutrition is more than fuel. Yes, nutrition is wonderful as fuel, it literally keeps us alive. And nutrition and eating is also emotional, social, relational, celebratory, sensory, pleasurable. It involves tradition and nostalgia and so on. So good enough nutrition tries to be really holistic in the way that it incorporates all of the kind of complexity of how nutrition and food shows up in our lives. So that's it. Imperfection, authenticity, flexibility, practical and holistic. So you might be there thinking, okay, Great, I'm sold. Good enough nutrition sounds like a wonderful concept. I'm sick of following the status quo and always feeling like I can't measure up to society's expectations of, quote unquote, perfect eating. You might have been stuck on that yo-yo dieting cycle and you're absolutely fed up with that. You know it doesn't work and you're ready for something new. But then the question I get is, how do I do good enough nutrition? Like, if diet culture is all I've ever known, how do I incorporate that in my life? And so for the rest of this episode, I wanted to talk through 3 key things to do with how you can start applying good enough nutrition. The first one is looking out for diet red flags. So what are we trying to avoid or shift away from? Second is I want to offer just a new way of thinking about nutrition, share something that I believe to be true when thinking about nutrition. It might just start shifting your mindset slightly. And then the last one is I wanted to offer you some practical questions to start connecting with your authenticity when it comes to nutrition. All right, so firstly, I wanted to talk about diet red flags. As we shift away from perfectionism and towards imperfection or good enoughness, we want to be on the lookout for perfectionist diet red flags. What are we trying to avoid? What do we want to run a mile from once we see it? So the first one is that diets tend to be very dogmatic and rule-based. So if you can picture those lists that often say, eat these foods, don't eat these foods, they're very black and white, very dogmatic. Secondly, they tend to lack nuance. So it tends to kind of lump certain foods together as all good or certain foods together as all bad. And often they will use language. It's like good or bad or include, avoid, right? Very black and white. Thirdly, they tend to generalize, so they don't take into account your unique needs, preferences, or values. And of course, if you are looking at a diet, it is often a very general thing because it's given out to a population where the person creating it won't know somebody's unique needs. But I would hope that there would be a ton of caveats, right? And it wouldn't be it would have some nuance in there, and it might have some guidelines as to how it can be applied in different situations rather than just very generalized, right? Everyone do this, everyone do that. And then lastly, it often lacks consideration for, just reality, to be honest. So we live in a time with unheard of pressures that humans face today, and so they're often diets can be very unrealistic in the way that they might expect everyone to have a veggie patch and grow their own foods or buy all organic when, there's no consideration for the fact that there's so many pressures and property prices are through the roof, let alone to be able to have a garden, and people might be working 2 jobs. So they often don't take into account the social determinants of health. And they also often have pretty, binary focuses or to be honest, very shitty values. It's like they often value health or quote unquote health above all else. So there's lack of consideration for other areas of well-being, such as, our social health and our emotional health, which 100% comes into our relationship with food and nutrition. So those are some things that I really want you to watch out for if you are thinking about looking at a certain diet. Try and steer clear of things that are super dogmatic, lack nuance, very generalized, and don't give any caveats. I guess where I kind of have the biggest issue with many diets, things like intermittent fasting, for instance, is that they often lend themselves to disconnection from our own bodies and our own body's needs, to the point that we might even feel body cues and mistrust them, right? We might say, I can't be hungry because this doesn't fit into my eating window, or I can't be hungry, I just ate, right? And it's that kind of denial of our own body wisdom is the thing that I probably have the biggest issue with it when it comes to these diets. So that's probably something else you can add to the list, is if it's encouraging you to forego your own body wisdom and your own body cues for instead to follow these kind of external set of rules or these dogmatic set of rules, then that's something we also want to run a mile from. Okay, that's a summary about what to watch out for, what to avoid. Now, secondly, I wanted to offer just a new perspective, an alternative to those dogmatic diets, a new way of kind of looking at food. And obviously, I cannot share everything I talk about with clients in one little podcast, but this is perhaps just an alternative perspective that I wanted to share that you may not have heard before. And that is, as much as we talk about having a relationship with food, I think we still forget that that relationship is a two-way street. It's bi-directional. You know, we have thoughts and feelings and experiences related to our food, and our food also has an experience in us based on our unique thoughts, feelings, and our own unique body as well. I always think about the fact that we wouldn't accept a person-to-person relationship that has a total absence of joy and thoughtfulness. You know, that person would be out of our lives. So why do we accept that in our relationship with food? I truly believe that food eaten with joy, thoughtfulness, and intention is going to land very differently in the body than food eaten with pressure, shame, or guilt. Your reality is your reality. If there's a reality in the joy you feel eating a food, it's going to be experienced by your body very differently to the same food eaten with force or guilt, right? If you love a food, but it's on the don't eat diet list, you know, it's because you love it, because you find joy in it, because you eat it with intentionality, it's going to land differently in your body than if you detest eating a food. You may have given it a red hot go, right? You may have tried it in different ways and your body's just like, nope, I hate this. Even if the research only has positive things to say about that food, if you detest it, it is also going to land very differently in your body. Okay? So maybe that's just a new perspective, a new way to think about things. Because good enough nutrition promotes the idea that you know your body better than anyone, so only you get to make the decision about what, when, how much, and how food feels good for you. Ultimately, you can, follow certain nutrition principles and understanding the way things, what the research might say is helpful, and not at the cost of your own intuition and body's wisdom. Okay, perfect. Now, last of all, I wanted to offer you some questions that you might like to journal on or think about as a way to start the process of connecting with your own authenticity and giving you permission to redefine what eating looks like for you based on your own values. So, let me outline 3 questions that I find really helpful to ponder. The first one is having a think about what your 3 to 5 core values are in life. Remember when I said that Good Enough Nutrition is holistic? It takes into account all areas of our life, not just nutrition. It's really helpful to figure out what are your 3 to 5 core values in life. Examples of these can be things like relationships, kindness, connection, freedom, travel, home, career. You can just Google a list of values. Brené Brown has a really good list online. If you literally just Google Brené Brown values list, it will come up. And choose your top 3 to 5. Second question is, what are your 3 to 5 core values related to nutrition in particular? Some example were things like ease, convenience, variety, flavor, sharing, creativity, predictability, spontaneity, adventure, nourishment. I've actually got a great list from a dietitian called Fiona Sutherland, known as the Mindful Dietitian, a list of nourishing values, which I can make available maybe in the show notes. And so just go through these values and choose your top 3 to 5 core values when it comes to nutrition. Then lastly, I want to know, what does health or vibrancy feel like in your body in the here and now? Now, this can be something that evolves over time, and we have to be really careful not to compare to others or societal notions of what quote-unquote health looks like, and take into account things like your stage of life, your abilities or capacities or conditions, right? So maybe within answering this question, you can consider how you like to feel when you wake up and go to sleep. This can be things like your energy levels, stress levels, pain, self-talk, characteristics around time and nature or movement patterns or bowel movement patterns, all those things. It can be things that you notice in the body sensations, body cues, temperature, tightness in your muscles, strength. Lots of things you can consider, but remember that this is really unique to you, and you might be absolutely happy with where you are right now as it comes to your well-being, and that's wonderful. And it might change in future too, and that's okay. I guess 3 things that I really like to think about the most are my energy levels, my stress levels, and my level of emotional regulation are 3 things that I consider to be very important to me. All right, so based on those 3 questions and your definition of vibrancy, you can use the values and that definition to help guide your food decisions. That's kind of why we pose these questions, is that they help us to kind of be a North Star, help to guide how we make food decisions. And I wanted to actually give you an example of how it shows up for me, so that you have got something practical to see how it works. So an example of my values, I'll just tell you the ones when it comes to food or nutrition, are connection/intuition, predictability, and nourishment are my 3 ones. So as an example, predictability sounds boring, right? But it is actually really important to me because I know that I function a lot better when I eat regularly and consistently, and I have some predictability in my day and when I'll be eating and what that might be. So I know that because I really value that, I will put in additional effort to make this happen, even if it means packing snacks each morning or eating on the go or eating during meetings. I know that that predictability is really crucial for me. Flavor isn't one of my main ones, and it might be for someone else, but it isn't for me. So I will prioritize predictability and ease and speed over flavor, meaning that not all my meals are going to taste amazing or be presented perfectly, and I'm more than okay with that. That's why you won't find perfectly plated meals on my Instagram unless I'm eating out, for example, because that's not something that I value, really, that aesthetics around food. Some people are really visual when it comes to food. And that's wonderful. That's a really cool thing. But that's not me. And it actually gives me a lot of freedom because I know I'm not going to try to measure up to societal expectations of perfectly presented meals, because that's not something I value. So for me, it's slop on a plate, and I'm fine with that because it means my other values like nourishment and predictability and what I intuitively want are being cared for instead. Another example, if I'm thinking about the question around kind of health and vibrancy, another example of something that I really value is my inner peace and reduced stress levels. Now, I'm very grateful that my partner is willing to share the load when it comes to cooking. Does he make what I would make? No, I don't love sausages as much as he does, but I eat them because I value not having to cook every night for me, and it's good enough, right? It's such a huge weight off my shoulders, not having to feel like I have to eat the perfect dinner, because authentically, I know I value my inner peace, and I value that more than having the perfect dinner. And so that for me is an example of when it's good enough. And I can say that that's good enough and be happy with that. So that's an example of how good enough nutrition and your values can show up in your life. It encourages that shift away from things having to be perfect and having to control things, and the guilt that can often come up if we feel like we're not doing it quote unquote right. But if we're deciding that we know our values, we know us, and we decide that these things are more important than doing things the way that society says we should, there's so much freedom in that. All right, that's it. That's a summary. Thank you for being here. As always, hit me up on Instagram if you have any questions. I'm at Nadia Maxwell Nutrition, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to Good Enough Nutrition. If you have thoughts or questions from today's episode, hit me up over on my Instagram at Nadia Maxwell Nutrition. If you have a moment to rate or review the podcast, that would be amazing. Or share that you're listening on your stories and tag me. I absolutely love to see it. As always, remember that guilt has no place near our food or bodies, and you are good enough as you are always.